In 1971, India was facing a humanitarian catastrophe that the rest of the world chose to ignore. 1 crore refugees were pouring across the Indian border. The United Nations and Western countries turned a blind eye. A sitar player named Ravi Shankar decided to ask for help from his friend. In just 6 weeks, George Harrison assembled the greatest ensemble in rock history at Madison Square Garden to force the world to look at a genocide it didn't even know was happening. This is the story of a Pakistani army's purification project, a Cold War cover-up, and the night the modern charity mega event was born. The year 1970 was supposed to be a win for democracy in Pakistan. It was the country's first general election under a universal franchise. But when the Awami League, based in East Pakistan, won a landslide victory, the military junta in West Pakistan refused to hand over power. The generals in Rawalpindi looked down on East Pakistanis as an inferior race. They mocked them Bingos, viewing them through the lens of old colonial martial race theories that branded them as weak. On the night of March 25th, the Pakistani army launched Operation Searchlight to crush the democratic aspirations of its own citizens.
General Tikka Khan, popularly known as the Butcher, is sworn in as military governor. On the night of March 25th, the army moves to crush Bengal.
The irony was sharp. While Western nations were championing democracy in Latin America and Vietnam, they were actively funding the Pakistani military junta, crushing it. There was a specific target in this violence. 1 in 5 East Pakistanis were Hindus. Even the Bengali Muslims were seen as corrupted because they retained Hindu customs like wearing bindis or celebrating harvest festivals. For the Punjabi-dominated military, this was unclean. As award-winning journalist Sidney Shandberg wrote in his New York Times report, the Pakistani army blamed the Hindu minority for the autonomy movement. One Pakistani major, quoted in the article, claimed that Bengali Hindus were worse than others because they were sucking the blood out of Pakistan. The American consul staff at Dhaka, who were eyewitnesses to the crimes, sent desperate cables to Washington. Hindus undeniably the special focus of military brutality. Hindu neighborhoods burned in Dhaka. Hindu temples set on fire by the army. However, they were ignored by American President Nixon and his national security advisor Henry Kissinger. One consulate staffer in Dhaka bluntly mentioned to Kissinger that targeting Hindus was simply an opportunity to purify East Pakistan. The Pakistan generals believed that by slaughtering or driving out the Hindus, they could destroy the Awami League's political dominance and ensure West Pakistan maintained a population majority. They wanted to rid the state of what they called anti-Islamic elements. The result was the largest single displacement of the refugees in the second half of the 20th century. By the end of the monsoon season, 10 million people had crossed into India. The whole state of West Bengal became one massive, muddy refugee camp. But the world did nothing. Prince Sadruddin Khan, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, was a personal friend of the Pakistani dictator Yahya Khan. He claimed India was exaggerating the scale of the problem. But you can't exaggerate the conditions. The camps reeked of human waste. With no sanitation, a field the size of a city block was designated as a latrine, but colossal numbers of children and adults stricken with diarrhea simply couldn't make it. Feces mixed with the mud and sloshed into the overcrowded town and leaky tents where people lived and ate. India's relief effort was shot through with failures. Contractors, police, and civilian officials abandoned their posts, leaving refugees without rations for weeks. Some exiles actually returned to the violence of the East Pakistan in sheer disgust, preferring a bullet to the slow agony of the camps. Cholera claimed 6,000 lives. Survivors suffered from edema, hair loss, and a haunting apathy. The youngest died first. Ted Kennedy was the only voice for the victims in the US. Senator Kennedy used his position on the Senate Judiciary Committee to report on the humanitarian crisis, criticizing US complicity in the conflict. He visited the camps and saw children under 5 who were clearly hours away from death. He saw a little boy whose eyes had clouded over. He was permanently blind from a lack of vitamin A. A single injection a day earlier would have saved his sight. In another tent, a baby continued to nurse from his dead mother.
Experts predict that hundreds of thousands of children will die within months. Those children who survive will be physically and mentally retarded for life.
India was desperate. Indira Gandhi wrote to 61 countries for help. It cost $400 million to keep the refugees alive for 6 months. The world sent only $20 million. Kennedy returned to the US and told the truth. Hardest hit have been members of the Hindu community who have been robbed of their lands and shops, systematically slaughtered. Even as this happened, India itself was hiding something. Over 90% of the refugees were Hindu. The government feared this would fuel Hindu nationalist politics and undermine India's secular image. Indira Gandhi's advisor, P.N. Huxar, instructed state media to quote victims from all religions equally. During a foreign tour, Swaran Singh, India's external affairs minister, admitted the cover-up of majority Hindu victims. In India, we have tried to cover that up, but we have no hesitation in stating the figure to foreigners. While the free world took the side of a military dictatorship, it was left to musicians in New York to speak the truth. George Harrison was an English musician and lead guitarist for the Beatles, but he was also a deeply spiritual individual and a devoted practitioner of Hinduism. Over the years, he had grown close with Ravi Shankar, spending weeks in India studying the sitar and immersing himself in spirituality. When Shankar told him about the crisis in his homeland, Harrison realized he had a unique power, a global platform that no politician could match. He decided to leverage his fame to make the world care. He threw the event together in just 6 weeks. He called Ringo Starr, Eric Clapton, Billy Preston, and Leon Russell. They all said yes. As George put it, it was just friends seeing who was available to turn up. The musicians involved put aside their own egos because they felt the cause was bigger than any one of them. On August 1st, 1971, they sold out 2 shows at Madison Square Garden. Ravi Shankar opened the show with a warning: "We are musicians, we are not politicians." But the music was the message. Between sets, the crowd was shown films of the refugee camps, images of the corpses, and starving children that the UN had dismissed as exaggerations. Then, George brought out Bob Dylan. Dylan had been in hiding for years, but he walked out and sang. The audience knew he was talking directly to Nixon. The generals in Rawalpindi were in shock. The Indian government was delighted by the unexpected windfall, where politicians had failed. The concert succeeded. It generated millions of dollars and, more importantly, a global surge of awareness.
Overnight, everybody knew the name of Bangladesh all over the world.
The concert for Bangladesh proved that when the world's institutions fail, culture has to step in. It set the blueprint for every major charity event that followed, from Live Aid to Farm Aid.
I think the most memorable thing really was the fact that it came off and that it worked.
It was an immense success artistically. And, again, I use the word spiritually because he decided he would use this great ability he had for another reason.
But history doesn't always have a happy ending. Even after independence, the plight of Bangladeshi Hindus has continued to worsen. Their population has steadily decreased, and they remain the targets of religious persecution to this day.